Welcome to the first episode of Curveballs and Lemonade. I'm your host, Judy Kogan. I'm so excited for my first guest today. Her name is Jennifer Satel. She is a mom, wife, wildly successful professional home organizer, also a podcast host of Unpacking with Jennifer Satel, and she's also studying to be a Pilates instructor. There isn't anything that this woman can't do. She's on the podcast today to talk about her curveball, which is something that is not often talked about. It's secondary infertility. After she had an amazing, seamless first baby, she and her husband struggled to have a second child, and it has really thrown her for a loop. She's here today to talk about that experience and how she has made lemonade from that really, really difficult curveball. Let's dive right in. Jennifer, I'm so grateful you're here and willing to share your story with us. Welcome to Curveballs and Lemonade.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So this is really a full circle moment for me because, as you know, I first started thinking about launching this podcast a couple months ago on the drive home from your production studio where you had me as a guest on your podcast, Unpacking with Jennifer Satel.
I'm so proud of you for doing this. I really am. I think it's going to be great. You're going to love it.
Thank you. Thank you for being my inspiration. And thank you for always supporting me. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast and specifically on the podcast first is because you've been so honest on your own podcast about a very real and often quiet struggle, which is the difficulty of trying to have another baby after having an amazing first baby. So many people assume that the journey is straightforward after you have a first child pretty easily, pretty uneventfully. But that's not always the case. And your willingness to talk about that major curveball on quite a few of your own podcast episodes, I truly believe has helped open the door for others to feel less alone. So that's what I want to talk about.
I hope so. That's why it's hard to talk about, but I know that I'm not alone. And that's what I learned in this process.
You're not. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about your journey, and we're going to talk about, how that curveball affected you and how it still affects you. So let's dive right in. First things first, you have an amazing 10-year-old daughter, Charlotte.
I do. We do. She's awesome.
She is. She's amazing. And so my first question for you is, when did you and your equally amazing husband, David, first realize that growing your family again might not be as straightforward as you expected?
Honestly, I would say probably about a year after I had her. I think, I'm saying that kind of loosely because I don't remember exactly, but I feel that we had kind of talked about, because right away when I had her, you're not sleeping, you're all these things. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. But, we kind of started talking about it a little bit, and about probably 6-7 months, because I wasn't getting any younger. So I would say about a year, because with Charlotte, we were so lucky and so blessed. And I have not forgotten that, because I didn't even think, I thought it was going to take a year because I had gone off the pill with Charlotte, and it didn't. So I was just so wow, the universe, this is so amazing. So
the stars are aligned.
The stars are aligned, the moon is full, whatever it is. And so, David and I kind of noticed it wasn't it was a couple months, and then a couple more months. And then pretty soon I was kind of all right, I'm going to go and get the ovulation test. I had never even done that. I think you might have even told me about, you told me and helped me with so many things. And I that I love that. And thank you so much. But I got the ovulation test, and then that was a couple months, more months. And then I talked to my doctor because I was like, hey, Marlene, this is what I'm doing. This is what's going on. And she was like, let's start, because I just thought the only option was IVF. I didn't know there was a couple other smaller, less expensive options. We're obviously going to go that route.
Sure.
And so we tried the IUI. We tried, that about 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And then we had to, kind of talk a little bit further. But I would say about a year after she was born, and I was like, oh, okay. But then I also was thinking to myself, I'm not stupid. Yes, I was kind of alone in this and to myself, but I know things don't happen that easily. So it's not like I wasn't worried yet. I was just like, okay, this is going to be a little harder. And we tried a couple of those things and they did not work. And once I did the IUI 3 times, I was like, okay, this isn't smooth. This is going to be a problem. And I was very sad about that. And I knew I had to, do something, about it. So, that's kind of to answer that question. It did take a while. I mean, it didn't take that long, but it was a process.
Okay. So, and you're about a year in at this point? A year?
Yeah, probably
so
about a
Charlotte's
year, year and a half. Yeah, because about a year is when I realized that. And then we started the IUI, but it was, you would do it each month. So I did 3 of them. So it's 3 more months. And then, there was probably a hiccup or 1 or 2 in between each one of those IUIs. So I would say now we're probably at about a year and a half.
Okay. And the next step was IVF, or was there something in between there?
The next thing was IVF, but obviously I was absolutely not educated in like cost and steps. And I talked to my doctor about it. And, I think I don't even think I had talked to you at this point. I'll be honest with you. I don't think I had talked to you about maybe the IVF at this point, but, kind of looked and see how much it is and cost and what's the process like. And, right away, it was honestly the financial was the big one, without a doubt. I mean, because in my head, I'm going to move.
Remind us again what year this was, just because we all know everything is so expensive right now. But what year was this?
This was almost
2020.
Probably. No. This was, it was about going into 19. Probably going into 19. Yeah. So I talked to Marlene, just kind of asking her the steps, and obviously she could give me information, but I looked online. I obviously saw the cost and kind of talked about that, and then we didn't really do anything for a bit because I'll be honest, even though I say I've moved mountains and heavens and earth, there are moments where money, unfortunately, is the hindrance. And I knew,
yeah, sure.
I mean, you're looking at, and this was about, they were saying anywhere from like about 35, I want to say like 25 to 35,000.
Wow.
Okay. Then, they give you that kind of range. So, and I had reached out to a couple different places and I even went and had a consultation at one of the places. And again, it was kind of that range. And this was just solely IVF. And I didn't ask. I just wanted to see, what does that process look like? David and I were like, oh shit. Yeah. And we kind of paused for a bit. It's like, what do we do? How, and Charlotte was still little. So it was like, we still had a lot with just kind of trying not to keep her alive and figure out what we're doing as newer parents. And so that was the number one hindrance was the
financial
cost.
piece of it. Yeah, sure.
It really is. And I hate that. I'll say that even now, and I'll dive into that a little more. But the fact that you're like, I want this and money shouldn't be a factor. But unfortunately, it's one thing to be like, oh, I want to move into Malibu on the beach. And you're like, yeah, right. But you're like, I want to expand our family. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like, geez, like, come on, come on. So that was that. That was we probably waited about 6 months before the next step, which I know you're going to ask me about.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So, let's talk about IVF. You tell us about, did you interview a few doctors? Did you, how did you decide like who to go with and when to go that route?
So I was on this like, a lot. It was in my head all the time. And I didn't ask people because I didn't know, but I was going to clients' houses right around the same time. And, things happen. So the universe all of a sudden you wanted a red car, you never had a red car, or you never had a 4Runner, all of a sudden you see 10,000 of them, you know what I mean?
Yes,
So
yes.
I had clients, telling me like, oh, or I would see this stuff. I didn't know what it was, but I would see syringes, just stuff and pamphlets and just stuff. And they would tell me like, oh, well, we had some fertility issues, da, da, da. So I didn't really ask a lot because I'm still that person. I just don't. Knowing what I know now, I really never ask because that's like the worst thing. But I was asking a couple questions. If they said something, I would ask. So if
Sure.
they opened the door, I would put my toe in there and just be like, oh, you did do that. Do you mind me asking, like, where did you go? Or just so I can get like doctors' names, or do you recommend somebody? We're having a little bit of fertility troubles. When I say this, it was not very often did I say this. I didn't give my story. I was just like, oh, really? That's great. And a lot of times they would just tell me the cost was such a huge thing. And they gave me some doctor's information. So I reached out to a couple, and I actually went to the consultation, and one I did like a phone consultation at the time, and got some information, got cost and all of that. Then I waited a little bit of time, like I said, and it was just something that was so important. And David and David's a guy, so I would have to say, like, do you wanted more? Like I knew he wanted more kids. I know he wanted a bigger family. But I was like 100% laser focused on this, like 100%. And so I would be like, are we still on the same page about this? And of course we were, and we both had talked about, originally I was like, oh, I want like 3 to 4 kids. And then I was just like, just want another kid.
Okay.
Like, just 2, 1.5. I mean, something, right? So, it was hard. So the heavens opened up to me. The universe said, Jennifer. So Marlene, my doctor, who I had on my podcast, who's just the most amazing person in the entire world. And she actually reached out to me one day, like a Tuesday, she's like, hey. And so, she's an OB and a gynecologist, all of those things. And she has people and doctors' offices come in and do presentations for them all the time. She's like, you're never going to believe this. They're doing a trial. This place that came in, this office, she goes, it was for fertility. And I was like, oh, she's telling me this because, and she's like, I think without knowing all of she goes, I know what you need, but I think you're going to meet the criteria for what they're looking for. And it was someone who was over 40, had certain levels of all of the things and, just whatever. She goes, now they'll have to test you, but do you want me to give you their information? And I don't remember if she said free trial or I maybe assumed it was a free trial. I don't know how that worked. I think I assumed it was a free trial. No. I think it was supposed to be kind of a free trial. And I met up with them.
And it wasn't free? You'll tell me later, but it wasn't free?
Yeah, I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
Well, there was a lot of, it was free, but it wasn't because there was a couple things that, yeah, that's right. It was free. She's like, if you meet the criteria, which I ended up doing the testing that they required, whether it was through Marlene or through their office, I kind of was both, just some blood work, get some levels and stuff. And they're like, you meet 4 of the 5. And that's what they were looking for, someone who meets 4 of the 5 requirements. I was like, great. So that was in Santa Monica. And so we started the process, filling out all the paperwork and stuff. And then they exam, whatever. I'm just kind of jumping the gun here, but they exam. And then they're like, I feel like we see something on the it's like the, what's it called? I'm totally drawing a blank. Not the x-ray, but when they're looking, they kind of found something. Ultrasound. Thank you. I was like, what is it called? And so then I had to go and have a procedure done. They thought it was like maybe a little cyst or something. Okay. That's where the cost ended up coming in. That was one of the things. And then it ended up being nothing. So they were hesitant because otherwise it was going to be, so that was like almost $20,000.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. It ended up being, now I didn't know this at the time. I just was like, oh, my insurance will cover, Yeah, they covered like a nothing because that was like through an IVF. That was not through, you know what I mean? So it ended up costing about almost $20,000. I think it was like 19 something. And I was like, well, at the end, I'm just telling you the financial aspect. Yeah. And then with that, I started doing the process with this place in Santa Monica.
And just so the
And
listeners know, you live in the San Fernando Valley, so it's
I
not
live in the San Fernando Valley.
far,
So,
but
and
not
I'm on
super
the,
close.
yeah, I'm on the other end of the 101. So, you know, I had to go and all the appointments were always at like 7 in the morning. So
Well, at least no traffic though, right?
at least not, yeah, a lot
Yeah,
less
it's a
traffic. So
schlep
that was
though.
fun. It was a little bit of a schlep. And, you know, in the beginning, I was doing it like 3 times a week.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we
I don't think I
finally
knew that.
did, we did a retrieval. So we, you know, and that's a process. And I actually want to talk about that really quick is, you know, the thing is I see about David and, you know, he's awesome. He's such a
Yes.
good guy, but it was really hard for him to give me the shots. He
Yeah.
had a hard time with that. And,
Was
you
it
know, it was
daily
all these shots.
daily
It was,
shots or for how long?
yeah, it was daily shots, like, you know, progesterone, like all these different things.
Okay.
But I think there was like 2, for the most part, I feel like there was 2 during that week before, you know, everything where you're really like 2 or 3 shots. It was a lot. He was having a hard time. He just felt terrible doing it. He's like, this is just not like, I don't want to do this. And it's like, you're trying to find a spot. And so I catch him like kind of teary eyed and stuff. And I'm like, it's okay. It's all worth it. You know, it's all going to be worth it. It's okay. And, you know, I'd have bruises and stuff and it, you know, it kind of sucks. It's a little bit emotional. You don't think about it. I never really paid attention, but he was the one administering them. And, you know, we didn't really know what to do. And we were kind of like, it was so funny. Like that first day they tell you and then nothing works. So we can't figure out how to read it and everything. And anyways, I do the retrieval and, the first retrieval and I was very fertile that just, you know, so you have, I had like 21, embryos or whatever. And then they put them in this, like, I'm not really good with the terminology, like blastio something. So they do this thing and, it takes like, I think it ends up being about 5 days from start to finish from once they do the retrieval and they put it in there for 72 hours, I think. And it's kind of like freezing them or whatever it's doing. And then they tell you, so when I had 21 the first time, 3 ended up being viable. So the 3 they thought were good. They were like, out of 21, 3 were good. And in my head, that was terrible. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, that's an F. If you're grading, that's an F. And they're like, no, that's like, wonderful.
It's 15%, but okay.
You know, this is an F. I failed everything. And they're like, no. And everything was because of your age, you know, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. One of the things I learned from this, and I wish, you know, I say this now during the process, I didn't educate myself a lot on the terms. I mean, I just wanted this so bad. The trial, sign off. I didn't realize what I was signing off on in terms of what that included. And so the first, when they did the first, I did the retrieval, then they did the implant or whatever, whatever they call it. It didn't take, they told me like 2 days later, maybe 2 days later. I don't even know. And I was heartbroken because I'm like, I'm at an IVF place. Like this is absolutely, these are the top tier people. So I just assumed, oh, this is going to take, like, we got this, and it didn't. Yeah. And then I was like, part of the terms of the trial was you get two included, like 2,
rounds
implants. Yeah, 2 rounds. So that was 1. So now I'm like, okay. And so the next one I did was, and I'm going to preface this, was literally the week that everything shut down with COVID.
Oh my gosh.
So literally I did it like on that Tuesday, and I think everything shut down like on that Friday, if I remember correctly. So, but I still have to go. So right after you do the round, you know, the implant or whatever, you have to go every morning and they take your levels. So I went every morning for like the week after just to, you know, make sure everything was good. And they're like, come back, you know, and they're like, everything's good. And then everything shut down. So, which was weird because, I mean, not that David would have gone with me. There's no one on the road, which was great in terms of driving. I got there if it was 40 minutes, 30 minutes, it was like 12 minutes, I felt. But anyways, it went, you know, you're by yourself. It wasn't even a receptionist. Like literally everything was shut down. Yeah, they just had, they knew what time you were coming, and the doctor would be standing there with the assistant, like the nurse assistant, just to take you in. And then everybody was like waiting outside, but you didn't even see anybody really. And that's kind of how it was for like those 2 weeks. Okay. of that kind of stuff, which was kind of weird, kind of sad. Like you weren't talking to anybody. You didn't really know what was going on in the world. And here I am like, oh, it took, like, this is so great. And that was weird. And then I got to the day where it was the send off. So I got to the appointment where they're like, if everything looks good today, now you get to go to your doctor.
And remind me again, what week was 10 weeks?
So I made it to 12 weeks.
12 weeks. Okay.
Yeah, I made it to 12 weeks, and it was, so, I was so excited. I was so excited that I got through that hump. It was like, this is all worth it. You know, whatever, COVID be damned. This is good. And I get there and they're going to send me off and they're like, you can go to your doctor now. I do the blood work. We do the ultrasound. We do all of the same things every single time. You know, you're not there very long, you know, and I get home. So they're like, you get to go. So I remember texting Marlene. I left and I'm like, guess who gets to see you in like a week, you know, like a week or two. And she's like, oh my gosh. So they called me later on that day and this part sucked, I thought, is they called me at like 4:45 on a Friday.
Oh gosh.
And of course, I didn't answer. Of course, I was probably, I don't know, doing something or taking care of Charlotte. And I didn't see the message till like maybe 30 minutes after. And the message was like, your levels are low. We're a little worried. Just give us a call on Monday. And I'm like, why would you say that? Like, that's, you know, this is so important. I mean, it's like so important. And I called Marlene. I was crying and I called her and I told her what they said. And she's like, listen, come, let's go to the doctor tomorrow or go to my office tomorrow, excuse me. And she's like, come in on Saturday. We'll just go in, the two of us, and I'll do an ultrasound. She goes, I don't know what your levels are. I'm not going to do all that, but let me just make sure everything's good. And I was like, thank you so much. She's like, everything looks good. I don't know what the levels are, but everything looks good on this end. So I was nervous, but I was like, she just looked again. Like, this is so good. And by Monday, it wasn't good. It was really terrible. And I struggled. They told me basically that, they told me that, you know, it had like, and I know there's different levels and I'm probably, you know, some of this stuff I have blocked out because it's hard, but you know, you have a child that has the trisomy, whatever. Mine was like trisomy 18, let's say. And then there's like a 13. So there's one with Down syndrome and then there's the 18 and then there's the 13. I don't know what it is, but it looked like it was this trisomy 18. And basically, but again, I don't speak medical. So a lot of it was very clinical and very on the phone. And it was like hard to understand. And they're like, basically, you know, this is what's going to happen is if you continue this pregnancy, the baby will not survive the full term of the pregnancy or it won't survive right after you deliver. And, but they said it in a little bit different way. And that was really hard. I'm talking like really hard. And so because I trust Marlene with everything, I asked her if she could call them back, if she could talk to them at some point and hear what they say and then tell it to me so I understood. And I did. And basically she told me, that's what she told me so I could understand it. And I said, Marlene, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do. And she's like, I'm like, give me your opinion. And she's like, I don't think you have any hope for this to work out. And I said, okay. And we handled it like I was like, okay, I don't want to wait another day. Like, let's do this. And it was still COVID, obviously. And, the part that, you know this, I know you know this, it was really, I know it sounds so weird. It seems so insignificant, but going to the hospital by yourself without your partner, without your, you know, I mean, we were in this together. Him and I were in this together and it was just a really shitty weekend and it was a really shitty week and he couldn't go in with me. So I'm just in the hospital by myself and the nurse is like, do you know why you're here? You know, they ask you that. And I was like, please don't make me say why I'm here. And she's like, okay. And she was trying to be funny and she was trying to do all those things. And it was just such a sad time. And I really struggled. I still can't even talk about it. And this was in 2020, you know, it was hard. And I think I realized like oh, this really may not happen. And but I don't think that way. I think glass half full, like I'll have to sell plasma. Again, this is later after this happened, but I was like, how I'm going to sell a kidney. Like, I'm like, this is going to happen. We'll figure it out. And I struggled right after. Like, I really struggled, but no one knew that. I didn't talk to anybody really about it. I have one of my lifelong friends named Erica. Part of anything that happens to me, part of me, I feel like I always tell her because I love her like a sister, but she's also a nurse. So I feel like if I tell her stuff that's like wrong with me or wrong with Charlotte, I'm at least telling like a person who can, kind of understand. And she knew everything that was going on. And she was about the only person I talked to. And when I say that, I'm not kidding. I did not tell everybody. I had kind of mentioned, because I'd already had 2 miscarriages before I did this.
Oh, wow.
And I forgot to mention that before I got into the story. I ended up having 3 miscarriages and a termination. And whatever miscarriage means, whatever that looks like, and maybe it wasn't viable, I don't know. But when I mentioned it the first time, it was just like, oh, I'm really sorry. But, and then people would say like, uh, remember you have Charlotte, and that kind of stuff. And I can't hear that. I still can't hear that. So Erica was just just a great, she's just a great person, and really was like the only person that she's like, I understand what you're saying. Not the things that I would hear from, other people. So then once I said that, once I mentioned about the first like miscarriage and we weren't having another baby, I really shut down. So I didn't say anything because it wasn't their fault. It wasn't any of my friends' faults. It's just, a couple of my really, really good friends, they're not married with kids. So they saw it as, you have Charlotte. That's it. You have Charlotte. And I'm like, yeah, but this has nothing to do with Charlotte. I really struggled. I still struggle. I'm being honest with you. I can't even talk about it without crying. But one of the things was I just went to work. I kept busy, come home, super busy with Charlotte, and just tried to like not mention it. People asked me how I was. I'm okay. Thank you for asking. I would go to brunch. I would be normal, but anytime a question kind of veered towards me about how I was doing, I just didn't make it about me. I made it about everybody else. Or I would tell a funny story about Charlotte because I knew it wasn't good. And I ended up having one of my friends, she said I need to talk to a therapist. It had probably been about 6 months at this time, maybe 5 months at this time. And I was crying every day, which I still do for a couple minutes, but I was crying privately. Everything was private. It was like 5 minutes, maybe in the shower, whatever. And she specialized in fertility and loss. And she was in Redondo Beach and she was seeing people in person. And I went there and it was really great. It was great to talk to someone because she had gone through the same thing in a very similar situation, in terms of age and how many times and just things that were very similar. And I felt that it was relatable for me to kind of say what I was thinking and feeling. When people would say to me, just when you hear stuff, it's like you never ask a woman if she's pregnant, if she's maybe
Never.
looks, we all know that. But I feel that people saying like, well, you have Charlotte, you're so lucky. There are people that can't have any kids. Like things like that were really hard for me to hear because I'm like, you don't understand. Like, this isn't about Charlotte. It's about David and I having all this love. And we just wanted to have a bigger family. And so I was trying to understand how to handle that and going to clients' houses who were having babies, and which is fine. I don't hate the world because you have babies. It's just when you're in that, it's just really hard. And or at least for me, it's really hard.
No, it's hard for everyone. I think through that.
Everybody was pregnant. Everybody was freaking pregnant. Everybody was missing, their husbands were missing appointments to get vasectomies and got whoopsie. And, oh, I forgot to take my pill and whoopsie. And I'm like, and David and I remember one night he's like, maybe you need to smoke some pot and relax, and maybe we'll get pregnant, because you'd hear stories about that, and I don't even do that. And it was just funny. Like, you know, it was just like, let's have a drink and not think about it tonight. Which, anyways, talking to the therapist was really helpful. One thing that is I've found is there's no closure to this topic for me. I'm still not there yet. I still hope. My brain and my heart just don't align in that. They align in so many other things, but not that one. But she really gave me some tools that was really helpful. And I probably saw her for about probably 5 months, you know, like once every week. It was a little bit of a drive, but it was great because there was no traffic during that point too, not as much.
Oh.
And yeah, so that was kind of that. So
I'm so glad that you sought out therapy for yourself. I know I do remember talking to you about it at the time, and I was thinking how grateful I was that you did have that resource and that you had done that for yourself. And I also remember at the time, and think now as well, so thankful that you had Marlene as your,
oh God, yeah,
not just as a friend, but as a friend who could explain and support you through all that gnarly medical stuff that, no, let's be honest, like no one really understands the intricacies of all that. So to have her there, and also Erica as a nurse to help you.
And you, Judy, you were such a huge help to me. You knew that the financial part was the part that pissed me off, and you were giving me links, and she was giving you guys, she was so helpful too. Judy was one of the few people I actually talked to about. We also live very close. I would see her a lot, and you know, she's not a dummy. Judy, you're not a dummy. You probably saw my smile wasn't 100%, you know, all the time.
I knew, I knew, and you know, I had, I didn't experience secondary infertility. I had very close friends who were experiencing both primary and secondary. And so I watched them struggle like you did through miscarriages, through unsuccessfully getting pregnant, through failed, I hate that word, but through unsuccessful IVFs. I watched them, some of my friends sought out surrogacy, adoption, but I watched very close people to me go through it. So I, aside from being a generally sympathetic person, I had seen close people to me go through really heartbreaking times. And so, my heart broke for you. And I never once thought to myself, oh, you have Charlotte, aren't you grateful you have her? And I do see those as two totally separate things. They're not connected in any way in my mind, that because you can be so grateful, of course, that you have a child, and you can be devastated that you can't have a second child. Those are not necessarily connected. So, one question I have for you is, because I do remember, so much of your journey, and I was so hopeful before your send off, and I'll never forget where I was when you called me to tell me what had happened. After that Friday and after the news you found out that week. I'll never forget where I was in my garage in that spot. I still now, like 5-6 years later, still remember. And I think that's, even though I was supporting you at that time, I didn't really know what to say. Obviously, I provided a shoulder and an ear to listen, but I didn't know what to say. And so one question I have for you is, what advice would you give to people about how we could better support someone like you going through this journey? Like, how could friends or family support you through this?
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned that. I'm very, very close to my mom. It's always been me and my mom.
Yeah.
My mom really has not. She knows this. I finally had said something to her, but she was just like, well, it didn't happen, kind of thing. She wouldn't say anything. And I don't know, I would be like, why do you never mention it? It was like the elephant in the room. Like she would just go about her conversation, and it really killed me. It killed me. And she knows this. And I love her dearly, but she said, Jennifer, and she was honest, and she's like, I don't know what to say. I see how you are. I don't know what to say I can't fix this, And so in a weird way, I hoped she would have just been like more hugs, maybe more just cry it out. And she did. She just didn't say what I guess I expected. And I don't know that anybody does. But one of my friends, I remember, a couple of people said things, and it was like, I took it, it was like, oh, you're still trying? You guys are still trying to do that? And then like I was going into the hospital, and I think David had texted like 3 of the people that day I went into the hospital during COVID, and the 3 people that knew, like, she's going in, or they were like, let me know what happens, or whatever the situation was. I didn't, but I think he did. And one of my friends, and she's a great friend, but she's like, good luck. And I'm like, good luck.
Good luck.
Like in my head, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this pregnancy that I already have names for, that I've had in my journal, for 4 years, 3 years now. Good luck. This is a termination. Like, do you know what I've had? That's what I wanted to say. And I didn't say it, but I know she didn't mean it in the way that I took it. But I think the topics, when you're talking to your friends and your family, it's just, if they just say like those things, when people say like, I'm so sorry for your loss, or whatever, you just kind of like auto say these things because you don't know what to say. I had a hard time with that too. And I did talk about that in therapy. I'm like, because I love her like a sister. I know there wasn't malice in that, but that one was like, are you kidding me? So I think just like, I didn't want to be the downer to every time we wanted to, we did a girls brunch or something. I didn't want to be like, well, let me tell you what's going on now. But I think if there's a moment where you see that I need a hug, or somebody needs a hug, or maybe if they're not a very huggy person, maybe you just say, you pull that, someone pull me aside and just say, talk to me or something. I don't know that would help. But telling me that I have Charlotte and I should be lucky that I have her, because there's people in the world that can't even have kids at all. Or, well, you just want what you don't, you just don't like when you don't get your way. I heard that a few times.
Oh no.
Yeah, because I'm an only child. And as you know, one of the things that I really struggle with is being an only child, because it's not that I survived it, but I just don't want Charlotte to be by herself, and I know everybody will survive. I know I survived, but it wasn't that big of a deal back then. When I was about 8 years old, I moved in with my cousin. She's 6 months different than me. So it was like, I always had a play buddy,
Yeah.
I always had someone I didn't think about it. And, Charlotte, like, don't say those kind of things. Just sometimes, like, don't say, even if you think it privately, like, don't say those things. And I'm so cautious when I go to people's houses, clients' houses, because I've seen where they couldn't have another. They had the one. I've also seen some where they couldn't have any, even doing IVF, failed IVF. Some people had mortgaged their parents' houses, did like 6 and 7 things, and mortgage their parents' houses. And and David's like, we can do that, but then what? We can't, what are we doing? And that was the thing that was really hard. Because I'm like, I will do anything. I still will do anything. And, but the reality had to set in, and my brain still doesn't touch my heart, but it's still there. And I know that we had to just be okay with it. And I don't talk about it. I'm talking about it more on the podcast because I know I'm not alone. I had no idea there was this club of people that weren't having babies. I see people with freaking babies all the time, 4, 5, 6 babies. And I'm just like, geez, but I didn't know what went behind that, I didn't know that one time they did IVF and they had twins, or, you know what I mean? Like certain things. So, but I didn't know this was a club. So I knew now when I started talking on my podcast and talking a little bit more about it with people that I care and love and can understand, you're not alone. Like, you're not alone, because besides me, I didn't realize how many people have either done it, in the process of it, had to end up just doing, different levels of the egg donation, all these different options, adoption, things like that. And you're not alone. And your story is very important. And don't bottle it in. I mean, I cry every day. I've told you this before. I cry every day, usually in my car for about 3 to 5 minutes. I get it out of my system and I go about my day. No one knows, no one's the wiser, but it's still heavy on my heart. And
let me
I
ask
know
you this.
yeah.
No. First of all, this is excellent advice that you've just given, but I do want to interrupt you because I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
You've said that a couple times now that your brain and your heart, they're not connected or they haven't gotten there yet. And so my question for you is, do you think they're ever going to get there? I mean, and I say this because it breaks my heart that you cry every day. Obviously, if that's what gets you through the day, please keep crying every day, but it breaks my heart. Do you think you'll ever get there?
I hope so. I asked that to the therapist, and this was a couple years ago. I mean, I said, I have hope. I always have hope.
You're the most positive person ever. So yes, of course you have hope.
Thank you. But I said, I asked her 2 things. I said, I have so much hope that this is still going to happen. Does that leave when it doesn't? Do you still, at 80 years old, think I still have hope? And she's like, it will change. It did for me. And she's telling me her story, but she had done several rounds and she realized that her body was done with IVF and it couldn't do it. She's like, I'm done. And she was okay with that. And that's what she told me. And I appreciated that. And she said, I have hope. Because I asked her honestly, I said, can you please be honest? Do you still think that you still have a little bit of hope? She goes, sure, a little bit, but not like I did. And it's been a few years now. And, and so I believe that it will change. In my brain, I know logistically from my age, financial, all the bullshit that you don't want to think about. My heart is, David and I have so much love. We want to expand our family. I wanted Charlotte to have brothers and sisters. I wanted to have a big family, and they just don't connect because I still think that way. I still think like I still want that. I do think it will change. I do. And there's moments where I don't think about it as strongly. But on Easter, just a week ago, or just a Sunday, not even a week ago. Oh, almost. But we went to David's cousin's like little Easter egg hunt. He has like a 1-year-old and like a couple cousins, and we go. And Charlotte's attached to the 1-year-old. She's holding him. She's all these cute pictures and everything. Fine, great. But she comes back and I go, Charlotte, he's so cute. I hadn't seen him. I go, gosh, he's so cute. And she goes, I really wish I had a brother or sister. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, Jesus, and I looked at her and I was super honest with her. I said, I know, honey, but please know that I don't want to cry here. And I know, and we can talk about it later if you want to. And she just wiped my eye. She's so sweet. She wiped my eye and she goes, okay, mommy, we don't have to talk it here, but he was so cute. I just wanted to tell you.
Aww.
And I was like, and it was just so cute, but she hasn't said that in a while about the sibling. She does say it still, but I hadn't heard it in a while. So that one like kind of
opens the wound,
rejumbled up some of the heart and brain connection. Cause I was like, she's just so sweet and she's lucky too. She has, some really good little friends, and Marlene's daughter and her are first friends, and they're still friends. And I pray when they're 95, they're still, first friends, as a sister.
absolutely. And she has two amazing parents. I want to talk for a minute about David. I love David. I could talk
he loves you too.
the million David stories.
He's a good
and
one.
by the way, I was just recently looking at pictures from my birthday party last year. I can't believe he wore a wig to my birthday party. He's bald for the listeners, but he wore this amazing wig.
He was so proud. He was so proud.
I
like,
loved
do you think Judy will recognize me?
I didn't. That's the thing. I didn't. No, let's talk about David for a minute.
Yes, let's talk about him.
I could ask you a million questions. Obviously in this process, he had to balance supporting you, not just with the shots, but with all of the emotional and medical pieces of it, and also balance his own feelings and emotions throughout this. And so maybe I'll have him on one day, but I don't have him today. But so I want to ask you, like, how did you balance sort of all of the emotions that you were going through, and also sort of, helping him or being there for him throughout this process? Because that's a really tricky balance when you're going through this.
It really is. And I will say in the beginning, I think it was just, it wasn't like me, but it was a lot of like, are you okay? He's so good. He was so good. And if I had 19,000 hours to tell you all the amazing things, some days he would just see me, like after Charlotte went to bed, and he would come home from work and he would just look at me and he would give me a hug, and I didn't have to say anything. And I one day said to him, sometimes I forget to check in on you, and I want you to tell me if you're okay. And, he would say like, no, I'm not. Cause I'm like, do you cry? Like, not with me? Like, do you cry? And he's like, I do. I cry sometimes when I'm driving. Sometimes I'll see a really cute baby. Sometimes one of my clients will tell me, or my customers will tell me about their brand new baby and show it. And he goes, and I go in the car, when I'm driving, and I get sad. And, I wanted to check in, and I said, I'm sorry. And he goes, no, no, you're fine. Like, you're okay. I'm okay. He actually went with me one time to the therapist, which I thought was really great. I said, be honest. This is your time. He's really great. I felt like I let David down, and I mentioned this.
No.
But I did. I felt like I said, my body just, I feel like I let you down, David. I feel like I'm the reason, and there was just moments, not all the time, but one day I would think that, and then I haven't thought about it since. But I just, wanted him to know that, I'm sorry. I kept apologizing that I'm sorry I couldn't do this. I can't, my body just, it won't do it. And I'm really sorry, but I love you. And he's like, I am happy with what we have, and we have the best peanut in the whole entire world. And on top of having the best little peanut in the entire world, and she's so kind and she's so great and all these things. And then I kept getting dogs and kept getting puppies to kind of replace it. And he's like, and then we have these 4 great dogs, and, and we're great. And he's so positive, and he's so awesome. And I sometimes, want to shake the shit out of him, but I have to tell you, he really was so great during this time, and he still is. When I have a moment, he still is, and he's one of the good ones. And I felt like I was letting them down, and he's like, you didn't let me down. You didn't. Like, we have the best family ever.
You do. And when I say no, I don't mean no, don't feel that way. Like, no, you didn't let anybody down.
Okay.
Thank you for that. So you had mentioned earlier that you realized that since you started talking about this experience and what you've been through on your own podcast, Unpacking with Jennifer Satel, that you've realized that you're not alone. So it sounds like you really felt alone, and you've talked about feeling alone. And I'm glad that you've started talking about it, and I'm certainly glad that you've come here and talked about it. And my last question for you is there anything that you wish more people understood about what you've gone through throughout this process?
It's really, I don't know. I'm not the expert, but for me, I just didn't know how to handle a lot of the emotions I was having. And I don't know, I don't want to say should have talked to a therapist before, but I do know that with everything, they have like support groups and stuff like that. And I feel that I might even consider still maybe going to a support group or something because we don't know how to manage some of these emotions. Talking to a therapist is wonderful, but when you're sitting in a room with people that have had some of the same situations, or maybe they're, whatever, or maybe the exact same situation, because I felt in the beginning when all this was going on and I was not paying attention, I just was like, wow, I didn't know that so many people were going through IVF and it's a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. Why would I know that, But now 6 years later, 5 years later, 4 years later, whatever, I know that so many clients of mine, and I just see such a small percentage, and I feel like so many have. So I know there's a world of this. And if you can take time and talk to a group that is in the exact same boat as you, obviously a therapist, they're going to give you tricks and tools and stuff that
Sure.
I used. But when you sit down in a room with people that are going through the same thing, you guys can sit there, cry together. Maybe you're not, if you're sitting there, you're probably going to want to tell your story because you're going to hear these women talk about their stories, and you could have the exact same story, worse, better, indifferent. But it really is nice to know that you're not alone with real people. And I'm not saying a therapist is not, but that's just her doing, or them doing their job, right? They're telling you the tools.
Sure.
Is that's what you need. How to control your emotions, how to feel. It's okay to feel sad that this isn't going in the direction you wanted it to. Frustrated, mad that somebody can have 8 kids and I can't have 2. But, and not feeling guilty that I want to say, well, but I do have the one and some people don't have the one. And I had to get out of myself and I needed to understand, and I still think I do, is talk to somebody that can talk to groups. There's community groups. I'm sure at fertility places they have, you're not alone. And I just keep saying that because it's just, like I said, I didn't want to be a downer to my friends because I'm always so upbeat. And it's okay to be a downer. It's okay to tell them and
Yeah.
be honest. And if you can't be honest with them, then go talk to people that you can relate to in a little bit different capacity. And that's something that I should still do. And I wish I would have done, in that first period of time. After the first round of fertility, I did do it a second round, and I know, you know that, but I did try a second round, and I knew that my options were even less then. And some of the options you don't want to hear, you just want to be like, oh, I want to do it. So talk to people, just don't bottle it up, because I feel that when I cried out in my car for 5 minutes and I'm good to go, you would never know that I cried for 5 minutes if I didn't talk about it. If I didn't say that, most people would never know, because they're always like, you're so good, you're so happy, you're so this. And there are moments where I'm not, and I'm sure there are people that have severe depression and you can see it and know it. I maybe hid my depression a little bit about this topic, a lot of it, actually.
Yeah.
It seems, it seems like I did. And I still cry in my car just because I don't know. You're not alone. I keep saying it, but that's what I realized through this is like, I'm not doing this alone. I'm not feeling these things. You get frustrated when somebody asks you like, oh, you're still doing this, or, oh, so you never had another kid? Oh, you just have the one? Those kind of things, they don't mean anything by it. I know most people don't, but I take it so like, if you knew what I was going through and you knew what other
Sure.
people were going through, I want to say to them, if you knew what people are going through, just be careful with your words, and
Yeah.
talk to a group of women that are in the same boat, maybe might be a little bit more realistic.
Absolutely. Those things are so hurtful. And I always say that until you've walked in somebody else's shoes, really, really reserve judgment, because you have no idea what it's like until you've done that. So, well, listen, Jennifer.
100%. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. Your curveball is not one that I would wish on anyone. And I've watched you struggle, and I thank you for leaning on me. I hope I helped you throughout the process.
Oh my
And I hope
gosh,
that
more than you know.
I'm always here for you. And I really appreciate you coming on as my very first guest and telling your story.
I appreciate you for 1,000 reasons. One of them, I'm so proud of you for having this podcast. I'm so thankful that you had me as your first guest. We all have curveballs, and what does it say? Make lemonade and all of those things.
Yes.
And I try to do that. And I also just thank you for being such a great person, friend, all of the things. You've helped me more than you know. I don't say it enough, but I'm so thankful to be your first guest. You're amazing. You're the kindest person I know. You're my favorite person. You know that.
Back at you.
And I'm happy I could share my story and ignore the tears, because it hopefully will help other people know that they're not alone. And I'm sure with your future guests and their stories, the same thing. And that's what's so great about the podcast, is just letting people know that they're not alone, and their story is not just, it could be other people's too. So that's how I feel about it. And I thank you for letting me share my story that I should have maybe shared sooner, but I did it when I was ready. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thanks for listening to Curveballs and Lemonade. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and subscribe so you never miss a new story. New episodes drop every Thursday. Follow us on Instagram at Curveballs and Lemonade and on Facebook. For audio listeners, make sure to check out full video episodes on YouTube at Curveballs and Lemonade. Engineered by Robert Altschuler, Curveballs and Lemonade is produced by Command Creative Studios.